In the dead of November 1939, the northern forests of Finland became an icy battlefield, where the might of the Soviet Union met the relentless determination of a small, determined nation. The snow lay thick on the pines, muffling the sounds of movement, yet amplifying the tension that gripped every village and city. Finland, a nation of just over 4 million people, faced a military juggernaut, an opponent 10 times its size, with tanks, aircraft, and artillery that could flatten any conventional army. The world watched with disbelief. How could a country so small hope to resist the Red Army? Yet the Finns, hardened by winters harsher than most could imagine, were about to show that courage, strategy, and intimate knowledge of the land could turn the tide against overwhelming odds. The Soviets, confident in their sheer numbers and mechanized might, crossed the border with the expectation of a swift victory. Their plan was meticulous on paper, a blitzkrieg through dense forests and across frozen lakes, designed to crush Finland before international attention or aid could arrive. But the reality of the terrain was far from the neat lines and maps of Soviet generals. Snowdrifts reached the heights of men, forests were a maze of hidden pitfalls, and the sub-zero temperatures were merciless. Soldiers froze faster than they could advance, equipment malfunctioned, and the familiar patterns of war dissolved into chaos. The Finns, on the other hand, were in their element. Sleds, skis, and winter camouflage turned the environment itself into a weapon, and the small army's intimate knowledge of the terrain allowed them to strike where the enemy least expected. From the outset, Finnish forces relied on mobility and precision rather than brute force. Ski troops darted across frozen lakes, appearing like ghosts in the snowy wilderness, ambushing Soviet patrols, and vanishing before reinforcements could respond. Snipers, expertly concealed in snowdrifts and tree lines, targeted officers and radio operators, crippling the enemy's command structure. Even small squads of a dozen men could halt battalions, leveraging terrain and winter conditions to multiply their effectiveness. One such operation became legendary. A handful of soldiers destroyed an entire Soviet armored column by carefully placing explosives on frozen roads, sending tanks and trucks plunging into icy lakes. Word of these successes spread rapidly, instilling fear among the Soviet ranks and demonstrating that conventional strength could be neutralized by ingenuity and courage. Communication and morale played crucial roles in Finland's defense. The nation's leaders understood that the Red Army's advance could only be slowed by cohesion, speed, and adaptability. Civilian populations contributed by fortifying villages, constructing snow-blocked bunkers, and providing intelligence on enemy movements. Finnish soldiers, often drawn from rural communities, were accustomed to hunting and surviving in the harshest conditions. Their ability to traverse forests silently, track enemy movements, and live off the land created a psychological edge. The Soviets, accustomed to urban warfare and mechanized dominance, struggled to adapt to a conflict dictated by nature itself. The Winter War was also marked by improvisation on a massive scale. Finland's army, severely outnumbered and undersupplied, made innovative use of limited resources. Molotov cocktails, named after a Soviet politician, became a symbol of resistance, used effectively to disable tanks in close combat. Ingenious trap systems were laid across roads and forests, catching mechanized columns off guard. Even simple tactics, like cutting telephone lines or using the harsh climate to funnel enemy troops into kill zones, amplified the impact of small units. Every soldier, no matter how young or inexperienced, became a critical link in a chain that could stop a much larger force. Despite these victories, the Finnish army paid a high price. Casualties were significant, and the relentless cold claimed as many lives as the enemy's fire. Frostbite, starvation, and exhaustion were constant companions. Yet, even in the darkest moments, the resilience of the soldiers and civilians shone through. Families dug trenches together, soldiers shared meager rations, and communities maintained communication networks to ensure supplies reached the front lines. Courage was not an abstract concept, it was measured in daily survival, in the decision to fight despite overwhelming odds, and in the ability to endure what seemed impossible. The Soviet army, frustrated by repeated failures, adapted with increasing brutality. Massive artillery barrages and repeated frontal assaults were intended to break the Finnish lines. Villages were razed, forests scorched, and survivors pushed into desperate situations. Yet even these tactics, which relied on superior firepower, failed to achieve decisive results. Finnish troops retreated strategically when necessary, only to counterattack in unexpected ways, turning Soviet assumptions against them. Each small victory became a story of national pride, a demonstration that determination and strategy could outweigh numerical superiority. International attention turned to Finland. Reports of the tiny nation resisting the Soviet juggernaut inspired admiration and aid, even if indirect. Volunteers, supplies, and diplomatic support trickled in, though the global context of impending World War II limited the scale of assistance. Nevertheless, Finland's stand became a symbol of courage and the power of asymmetric warfare. Nations observed how terrain, climate, and morale could transform a small army into a formidable adversary. Military academies studied the Winter War for decades, dissecting how a combination of mobility, local knowledge, and adaptive strategy could turn the tide against overwhelming force. By the end of the first months of fighting, it was clear that the war would not be swift. The Red Army, despite its vast resources, faced logistical nightmares, demoralized troops, and a relentless enemy who refused to yield. Finland's defense was a study in patience, precision, and persistence. Small victories were celebrated with equal intensity as major battles, for each demonstrated the limits of Soviet power and the resilience of the Finnish spirit. Tales of ski soldiers disappearing into forests, snipers eliminating key targets, and civilians aiding in ingenious ways became part of a larger national narrative, one that would define Finland's identity for generations. The Winter War, though ultimately resulting in territorial concessions for Finland in the Moscow Peace Treaty, proved that even the smallest nation could resist the seemingly invincible. The Finnish army's ability to harness the environment, employ asymmetric tactics, and maintain morale under extreme conditions became legendary. The world learned that courage, intelligence, and unity could challenge even the mightiest of forces, and the story of a small army standing against the Soviet Union endured as a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. Skis, traps, and the art of resistance. Winter had tightened its grip over Finland, turning forests and lakes into frozen arenas where the smallest misstep could cost a soldier his life. By December 1939, the Red Army's advance had slowed to a crawl. Despite outnumbering the Finnish defenders 10-1, Soviet troops found themselves trapped in a paradox. Their numerical strength could not compensate for the deadly precision, mobility, and adaptability of their opponents. Finland's small army had transformed the very landscape into a weapon, and the Red Army, accustomed to mass assaults, struggled to anticipate the unpredictable tactics employed against them. The first weeks of December marked a turning point. Finnish ski patrols, often consisting of mere squads of 5 to 15 men, executed lightning raids behind enemy lines. They targeted supply depots, disrupted communication lines, and ambushed advancing columns. These soldiers were not just skilled in combat, they were hunters and woodsmen, intimately familiar with every hill, ravine, and frozen stream. They moved silently through the snow, leaving barely a trace, striking with deadly efficiency, and vanishing before reinforcements could respond. In many instances, Soviet units reported feeling as if the forest itself had come alive against them. The psychological impact was enormous, turning fear into a force multiplier for the Finnish defenders. One of the most iconic tactics involved the Matti system, a method of encircling and isolating segments of the enemy army. Finnish units would divide Soviet columns into smaller pockets and attack them individually. These pockets, often trapped on frozen lakes or narrow forest roads, were subjected to continuous harassment, sniper fire, and artillery strikes. The Soviets found their heavy tanks and armored vehicles useless in dense forests and snow-covered terrain. As ice cracked beneath the weight of their machines, entire battalions became immobilized, vulnerable to small teams of well-trained Finnish soldiers. The ingenuity of the Matti tactic was not merely in its execution but in its strategic simplicity, using mobility and terrain to turn overwhelming numbers into a liability. Battles raged across regions like the Karelian Isthmus, where the Soviets launched repeated assaults on fortified positions. Finnish fortifications were modest but cleverly designed, trenches concealed by snowbanks, camouflaged foxholes, and layers of natural obstacles turned every advance into a deadly gamble. Artillery was scarce, yet strategically placed, every shell designed to maximize impact. The Finns leveraged their knowledge of local conditions. Frozen rivers became both pathways and traps, forests provided concealment, and sub-zero temperatures slowed mechanized columns. Soviet troops, frustrated by repeated failures, often resorted to sheer force, but the effectiveness of brute strength was systematically nullified by Finnish tactics. Snipers emerged as the silent heroes of the conflict. Figures like Simo Häyhä, famously dubbed the White Death, demonstrated the staggering impact a single, skilled marksman could have on a massive invading force. Häyhä, operating in sub-zero temperatures, utilized camouflage and intimate terrain knowledge to eliminate hundreds of Soviet soldiers. His precision not only inflicted casualties but also spread fear, slowing Soviet advances and forcing commanders to commit more resources to counter sniper operations. These sharpshooters, often concealed in snowdrifts or perched atop ridges, epitomized the asymmetric nature of the conflict. One man, armed with skill and patience, could wield influence over the course of an entire campaign. Beyond the battlefield, Finland's civilian population played a critical role in sustaining the war effort. Villages served as supply hubs, hospitals, and intelligence centers. Civilians guided troops through hidden trails, prepared food under freezing conditions, and even engaged in sabotage. The collaboration between military and civilians blurred the line between front lines and home front, ensuring that no Soviet advance went unobserved and that every defensive position had the support necessary to hold out against overwhelming odds. Communities, despite suffering destruction and displacement, exhibited remarkable resilience, their determination mirrored in every soldier's resolve. The harsh winter itself became an ally to the defenders. Sub-zero temperatures immobilized machinery, slowed troop movements, and inflicted casualties through frostbite and exposure. Soldiers adapted with layered clothing, heated shelters, and ingenious methods of staying warm while maintaining combat readiness. The environment was as much a weapon as any rifle or artillery piece. Soviet troops, unprepared for the severity of the Finnish winter, found their operational plans collapsing under conditions they could neither predict nor control. The Finns, by contrast, used the cold strategically, turning every blizzard and icy night into an advantage. Despite these successes, the human cost was immense. Each victory demanded sacrifice, endurance, and courage beyond ordinary measure. Casualties mounted, and the continuous stress of combat, isolation, and extreme cold tested both physical and mental resilience. Yet, morale remained remarkably high. Soldiers fought not just for survival but for the defense of their homeland, a principle that instilled unity and determination across all ranks. Stories of individual heroism rescuing comrades, risking life to deliver supplies, or holding a position against overwhelming numbers became legendary, embedding themselves in the national consciousness and ensuring that the memory of these deeds would outlive the war itself. As winter deepened, international attention intensified. Newspapers and radio broadcasts around the world marveled at the Finnish resistance. Analysts studied tactics, military schools dissected strategies, and public opinion sympathized with the tiny nation facing the colossal Soviet army. Finland's ability to leverage mobility, environment, and asymmetric tactics was celebrated as a master class in modern warfare. The lessons of the Winter War were clear: numerical superiority could be neutralized by strategy, local knowledge, and adaptability. Every skirmish, every Mahdi encirclement, and every sniper's shot contributed to a narrative that defied expectations and inspired generations. By January 1940, it was evident that the Red Army, despite its vast resources and relentless assaults, faced a prolonged and costly campaign. Finnish troops, though heavily outnumbered, had transformed despair into strategy, adversity into innovation. Each battle reinforced the principle that determination, skill, and intimate knowledge of the land could compensate for any shortage of men or material. The small army's resistance was not only a tactical victory but a moral one, proving to the world that courage and ingenuity could challenge even the most formidable adversary. The Winter War was far from over, but the foundations of Finnish resilience had been firmly established. The forests and frozen lakes, once passive landscapes, had become active participants in the conflict, favoring defenders over invaders. Every Soviet advance was met with surprise, every snow-covered trail a potential ambush. The army's ability to endure, innovate, and strike with precision was a testament to human ingenuity under extreme conditions. The narrative of a small nation halting a global superpower continued to unfold, blending strategy, heroism, and the harsh reality of survival in a way that would resonate for decades. Survival, strategy, and the weight of the world. By February 1940, the Winter War had dragged into a grueling rhythm of endurance, strategy, and relentless tension. The forests and frozen lakes of Finland were scarred with trenches, burned-out tanks, and frozen battlefields where both sides suffered losses that no map could fully capture. The Soviet Union, frustrated by repeated failures, intensified its assaults with waves of troops, massive artillery barrages, and attempts to penetrate the Karelian Isthmus, a crucial gateway to the heart of Finland. Yet, for every Soviet advance, the Finns had a countermeasure, a hidden path, or a tactical ploy waiting. It was a war not just of weapons, but of wits, stamina, and intimate knowledge of the land. The smallest Finnish units were now responsible for feats that would have been unimaginable for conventional armies. Ski troops operated in temperatures that would incapacitate most soldiers, navigating blinding blizzards to launch surprise attacks, deliver vital intelligence, or reinforce embattled outposts. These operations required precise coordination, extraordinary stamina, and nerves of steel. Even a delay of a few minutes could mean disaster, yet the Finns thrived under pressure. Their intimate knowledge of the terrain, combined with ingenuity in using the harsh environment as both shield and weapon, allowed them to outmaneuver a vastly superior opponent repeatedly. The Soviets, despite their overwhelming numerical advantage, began to experience the psychological toll of the conflict. Soldiers accustomed to urban campaigns were disoriented by dense forests, endless snow, and relentless ambushes. Commanders struggled to maintain cohesion as units were sliced apart by Finnish Mahdi tactics, snipers, and sudden artillery strikes. Communication failures became frequent, compounded by the freezing conditions that disrupted radios and vehicles. Morale plummeted, and reports of panic and desertion began to surface. The Finns, in contrast, were buoyed by national solidarity. Every citizen, from factory workers to school children, played a role in sustaining the war effort, reinforcing the notion that Finland's defense was a collective endeavor. Diplomacy also played a subtle but crucial role in shaping the conflict. The world watched in awe and apprehension as a tiny nation resisted one of the most powerful armies on the planet. Countries debated whether to intervene, send volunteers, or provide supplies. Although Finland could not rely on direct military aid, international sympathy bolstered morale and placed political pressure on the Soviet Union. Neutral nations monitored the conflict closely, understanding that the outcome could set precedents for small nations resisting larger aggressors. Finland's ability to endure, despite limited resources, became both a symbol of courage and a practical demonstration of asymmetric warfare on the global stage. The harshest trials of the Winter War, however, were not only against the enemy but against nature itself. Sub-zero temperatures caused frostbite, hypothermia, and equipment failures that claimed lives as readily as bullets or shells. Soldiers adapted by wearing layers of fur and wool, constructing makeshift shelters, and sharing warmth in rotating shifts. Supply chains stretched thin under snowstorms and impassable roads, forcing troops to live off ration packs, frozen lakes, or minimal provisions. Yet these extreme conditions, instead of breaking the Finnish defenders, became a source of strategic advantage. The army's intimate understanding of survival in winter allowed them to exploit every environmental hazard against the enemy. In the heart of the conflict, battles at places like Suma and Tolvaharvi exemplified the small army's tactical brilliance. The Soviets launched repeated assaults on fortified positions, expecting to overwhelm defenders with sheer numbers. Yet Finnish troops, entrenched and camouflaged, responded with coordinated artillery, precise counterattacks, and flexible defensive lines. Every attack that broke against the defenders' positions inflicted disproportionate losses on the attackers, slowing the Soviet advance and forcing commanders to reconsider strategies. Finnish ingenuity was evident in every detail, from improvised barriers to mobile ski units reinforcing threatened sectors, demonstrating that resourcefulness could rival sheer firepower. Civilians, too, were tested to extremes. Evacuations, frozen landscapes, and constant threats of bombardment demanded courage and adaptability. Families sheltered soldiers, transported supplies, and provided intelligence on enemy movements. Local knowledge of terrain and winter conditions amplified the army's effectiveness, creating a seamless integration between civilian resilience and military strategy. The war's intensity forged a collective spirit of survival and resistance, where each act of bravery, whether on the battlefield or at home, contributed to the defense of the nation. As winter gave way to early spring, both sides felt the cumulative effects of months of brutal conflict. The Soviet Union faced mounting casualties, logistical nightmares, and the realization that conventional tactics alone could not subdue Finland. The Finnish army, despite suffering from exhaustion and dwindling supplies, had demonstrated extraordinary endurance and adaptability. International observers took note, analyzing how a small force, armed with strategy, terrain knowledge, and determination, could resist a superpower. Lessons from the Winter War began influencing military theory, highlighting the effectiveness of asymmetric warfare and the critical role of morale, mobility, and environment in modern conflict. The conclusion of this chapter of history was as much political as it was military. The Moscow Peace Treaty, signed in March 1940, resulted in territorial concessions for Finland but allowed the nation to preserve its independence. For the Finnish people, the cost had been high, but the victory was moral and symbolic. They had shown that even a tiny army, facing overwhelming odds and extreme environmental challenges, could stand firm, inflict significant losses, and maintain national sovereignty. The Winter War's lessons resonated far beyond Finland, offering inspiration and strategic insights that would shape conflicts for decades. The war's legacy endured in stories of tactical brilliance, personal sacrifice, and national resilience. Ski troops, snipers, engineers, and civilians all contributed to a narrative that highlighted the power of knowledge, determination, and unity against formidable adversaries. The forested and frozen terrain, once perceived as a barrier, had become the ultimate ally. Each frozen lake crossed, each ambush executed, and each improvised defensive position exemplified the marriage of human ingenuity and environmental mastery. By the end of Chapter 3, it was clear that the Winter War was more than a military confrontation. It was a testament to survival under extreme conditions, a showcase of strategic adaptability, and a reflection of the human spirit's capacity to endure adversity. Finland's small army had transformed the seemingly impossible into a historic achievement, demonstrating that courage, intellect, and unity could challenge the mightiest of forces. The story, far from ending, continued to inspire generations, proving that even the harshest winters could not freeze the resolve of a determined people. Frost, fortitude, and legacy. As March 1940 unfolded, the snow began to recede from Finland's forests and lakes, revealing landscapes scarred by months of relentless conflict. The Winter War, though formally concluded with the Moscow Peace Treaty, left an indelible mark on the nation. Finland had ceded territory to the Soviet Union, yet it had preserved its sovereignty, a remarkable achievement given the overwhelming odds. The victory was not measured in land but in resilience, ingenuity, and the unyielding spirit of a people determined to defend their homeland. What remained after the fighting was a nation forever transformed by endurance, sacrifice, and strategic brilliance. The human cost of the Winter War was staggering. Tens of thousands of soldiers had fallen, and countless civilians had endured displacement, destruction, and suffering. Towns along the Karelian Isthmus lay in ruins, and forests once used as strategic battlegrounds bore the scars of artillery and explosives. Yet, amid this devastation, the stories of survival, heroism, and collaboration shone brightly. Soldiers who had endured impossible conditions returned home with tales of courage, from ski troops executing daring raids to snipers eliminating threats with unwavering precision. Civilians, who had risked everything to support the war effort, became part of a shared national narrative that celebrated determination over despair. The military lessons from the conflict reverberated far beyond Finland's borders. Analysts worldwide studied how a small, resource-limited army had leveraged terrain, climate, and mobility to neutralize a vastly superior opponent. The Mahti tactic, ski troop maneuvers, and sniper operations became case studies in asymmetric warfare. Countries grappling with the realities of World War II observed that strategy, preparation, and adaptability could outweigh raw numbers. Finland's approach proved that knowledge of one's environment, coupled with disciplined execution, could turn even the deadliest adversary into a manageable threat. Finnish society itself underwent a profound transformation. The war had united the population in a collective effort that transcended class, occupation, and geography. Every citizen had contributed to survival, whether by fortifying towns, transporting supplies, or gathering intelligence. This unity instilled a sense of national pride and identity that endured long after the last shots were fired. The Winter War became a defining moment for Finland, a testament to what a small nation could achieve when courage, ingenuity, and resilience converged in the face of overwhelming adversity. The international response to Finland's resistance also shaped the post-war perception of the conflict. Despite geopolitical constraints, the world recognized the extraordinary feats achieved by the Finnish defenders. Reports of ski troops vanishing into forests, snipers striking with deadly accuracy, and clever defensive tactics inspired admiration and strategic reflection. The story of a small army slowing the advance of one of the world's largest military powers became a symbol of hope for other nations facing potential aggression, demonstrating that determination, knowledge, and unity could counterbalance seemingly insurmountable force. The psychological impact on the Soviet Union was equally significant. Leaders had underestimated the Finnish resolve, and the losses suffered during the Winter War exposed weaknesses in training, strategy, and morale. For the Soviets, the conflict was a lesson in the limits of conventional power, the hazards of underestimating terrain, and the importance of adaptive leadership. The Red Army's experience in Finland influenced its approach in subsequent campaigns, emphasizing preparation, reconnaissance, and the dangers of overconfidence. For the soldiers themselves, the Winter War forged bonds of camaraderie and resilience that would last a lifetime. Veterans spoke of nights spent in freezing forests, of comrades who had risked everything to protect one another, and of the extraordinary satisfaction of overcoming seemingly insurmountable obstacles. These experiences became central to Finland's cultural memory, inspiring literature, films, and educational narratives that celebrated courage, ingenuity, and national pride. The war's legacy was not only military but profoundly human, highlighting the capacity for endurance, innovation, and collective spirit under the harshest conditions imaginable. The environmental challenges of the Winter War also left a lasting mark on military strategy and national consciousness. Soldiers had learned to read snowdrifts, anticipate avalanches, and exploit frozen lakes as both pathways and traps. Techniques developed in these frozen forests influenced future operations, emphasizing adaptability, terrain mastery, and the integration of environmental knowledge into combat planning. Finland's ability to turn nature itself into an ally demonstrated that strategic thinking extended beyond conventional weapons and resources, encompassing climate, terrain, and human ingenuity. As Finland emerged from the Winter War, the nation faced the dual realities of loss and pride. Territory had been sacrificed, yet independence remained intact. Casualties had been endured, yet resilience had triumphed. The Winter War's conclusion was not merely an end to fighting but a testament to what a small, determined nation could achieve when courage, knowledge, and unity converged. It became a story passed from generation to generation, a narrative that transcended the specifics of military tactics to embody universal lessons about endurance, strategy, and the human spirit. In retrospect, the Winter War stands as a historic testament to the power of a small nation confronting overwhelming odds. Finland's soldiers, civilians, and leaders had demonstrated that terrain, climate, intelligence, and morale could transform vulnerability into strength. Each ambush, each tactical innovation, each act of bravery contributed to a larger narrative of resilience that inspired not only their own country but the world. The war may have ended with concessions, but the legacy of courage and ingenuity remained intact, a reminder that even in the harshest winters, human determination could prevail against giants. The frozen forests of Finland, once battlefields of despair and struggle, became monuments to the endurance of the human spirit. Lessons learned, strategies perfected, and stories of heroism endured, ensuring that the Winter War would be remembered not merely as a military conflict, but as a timeless example of fortitude, intelligence, and unwavering courage. In the end, Finland had not just survived, it had defined what it meant to resist, to adapt, and to inspire generations long after the snow melted and the cannons fell silent.